right, we are almost wrapped up with Chapter 3. We're going to talk about nervous tissues in this video, and then we'll talk about tissue aging and repair in the last video for this week. So for nervous tissues, we just have a couple of goals for this section. We want to be able to recognize some classes of cells that make up nervous tissue and discuss a little bit about how this tissue helps integrate this perception and response. We are going to talk more about the nervous system much later in the semester. That'll be our last couple weeks of the semester, but we want to get a little bit of a preview now. Alright, so two main characteristics of nervous system tissue are that it is excitable, so it can be stimulated by some sort of impulse or signal, and then that it is capable of sending and receiving electrochemical signals. So both electrical signals and chemical signals, because we are going to get both types from our nervous system. We have two main types of cells in the nervous system. Neurons. These are going to generate or propagate the information being spread through our nervous system via something called action potentials. We'll talk a lot more about that at the end of the semester with the nervous system chapter. And then the other cell type is collectively referred to as neuroglia. There are multiple types of these cells, but their job is to support the neurons. So nervous tissue, we've got our graphic over here on the right and an actual slide of real nervous system tissue over on the left. Or sorry, I flipped those. Left is the graphic, right is our microscope slide. So neurons are going to be these structures right here. We'll talk more about those on the next slide. But surrounding those neurons, we have different types of neuroglia. All right, and these are those supporting cells. So we have some different types. We're not going to go into a ton of detail about them right now. So astrocytes are these ones in this kind of bluish color. Astrocytes are named based on their very distinctive star-shaped structure that we see here. We have a ton of these in the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, and they are going to do a lot of different things. So they can help regulate ion concentrations in the intracellular space, so in between the neuron cells. They're also going to help kind of collect and or break down certain neurotransmitters, so chemicals that are signaling certain things. They're also going to help form the blood-brain barrier, and that's really, really important to protect the brain from pathogens getting into it. So they're a very important component of that. And then they are also going to help kind of protect and form a barrier for forming our cerebrospinal fluid, which circulates through the brain and spinal cord. Next up are these microglial cells in green. We see a couple of those here. They are going to function as our nervous system's immune support cells. So these are going to help protect from any sorts of pathogens that maybe can get across that blood-brain barrier. There's not a lot of pathogens like that, but they do exist. All right, and then there's also obviously like injuries that can damage that barrier and allow a lot of pathogens in. So we do need certain nervous or immune cells in our nervous system to help protect there. All right, these are more closely related to macrophages, which are part of white blood cells, more than they're related to actual nervous system tissue. And then oligodendrocytes here in purple right here. So we've got a lot of these kind of spaced out in between and partially surrounding our neurons. Oligodendrocytes produce a substance called myelin in the central nervous system, again the brain and spinal cord, and their counterpart in the peripheral nervous system, which is all of the rest of the nerves in our body, are Schwann cells. All right, and they are both going to produce that myelin. Myelin is an insulating substance that actually helps nerve signals travel faster through these neurons. We'll talk more about that at the end of the semester. All right, so the neuron, which is the main component of our nervous system. So neurons are shaped roughly like this. They're not always going to look exactly this way. We do have some slightly different structures of neurons that we'll get into much later in the semester again. But they have a special structure that enables them to conduct these electrochemical signals through the body. And so our different pieces here is up here is where our nucleus is located in this main part of the cell. So we also have dendrites coming off of that, and these dendrites are going to connect to this other end of another neuron. All right, so we can have lots of dendrites so that we can have connections with multiple different neuron cells outside of that one signal cell. And then between those two ends is the axon, and this is where signals are sent through to other cells. All right, and so as you can see, they look a little bit different when we are looking at actual nervous system tissue that we've stained artificially, but we can see that cell body with the nucleus inside, that dark purple. And then we can't really see much of that axon or the dendrites or anything like that with this particular view, because we're really just not quite zoomed in enough in this slide to really see those. And this axon is what's going to have myelin sheaths wrapped around it. Not every single neuron is going to have that myelin. Some of them will, some of them won't. But that gap in between the myelin places is going to help increase the speed of an impulse transmitted by that neuron. So we can have chemical compounds signaling through neurons, which are going to be neurotransmitters. We have a lot of different neurotransmitters. We'll talk about one, acetylcholine, when we do muscles here in a couple of weeks, because that's for muscle signaling. But then there's others that people maybe are more familiar with, like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. Things like that are all neurotransmitters, and each neurotransmitter has a slightly different function within the body. Some of them can have overlapping functions and they need to work together for optimal function of the body, but they are all going to have slightly different purposes. And that wraps up our nervous tissue. We'll, again, get back to that much later in the semester and do a deeper dive into it. Our next video is going to cover the last section of the textbook, which is on tissue injury and aging.